Hey, welcome back to another great video. I'm here with Jodi Brown. Unfortunately, Amberly can't make it today to join us in this wonderful content that we're going to be providing. She just really wanted to be here, but she had a family conflict. We have Jodi here to help us host this great video. She's a brain tumor cancer survivor. She is an author of 4 different books. One of those books I have with me today, The Sun Still Shines, you should definitely check out. And Jodi is part of the Global Leader Group and teaches a lot on anti-fragility and resilience as one of their speakers.
I'm excited to be with you today and give you some ideas and tips for how you might be able to help your organization become anti-fragile.
Oh, this is going to be good. Let's go check it out.
Where I live, at our house, we live very close to a regional airport in Ogden, Utah. And on a nice day, it doesn't even have to be warm, as long as the winds are pretty calm, any given time of the day, about every 20 to 30 minutes on repeat, you can hear this sound of a little engine. It's very recognizable once you know what you're listening for. And a few minutes after you hear the engine, about 10 to 12 minutes later, all of a sudden, if you look up to the sky, you will see little ants dropping through the sky, and then their parachutes come out. And all day long, on repeat, people parachute and land at the Ogden airport. We can see this from our house all of the time. So if you happen to be lucky enough to have a day's worth of yard work to do, you can see it 30 or 40 times throughout the day. And there is a wonderful moment that happens when they pull that chute and the chute opens. You hear this glorious woohoo! And you can hear the joy in their voices as they are having this incredible adventure with their parachutes. So what I want to talk to you today is about parachutes. So what I do is I help train organizations and leaders to become anti-fragile. And anti-fragile is when you have systems in place where you grow stronger from struggle and change. You actually learn to thrive in the midst of crisis. Well, how do you do that? That's one of the principles I'm going to teach you today. One of the principles is one that I call the parachute principle. Now, if you are the one that has the parachute, I'm sure you do not want to have just one rope on this side and one rope on this side going to your chute. What you want to have is a whole network of cords. You want to have a spider web of cords so that there are so many different options that are holding that chute in place. That is called no single point of failure, but it's what I refer to as the parachute principle. So that you make sure that you can have that chute open and that you can get to ground safely, you need to employ layers of redundancy, so that you can have multiple cords. And if I had a picture, or if you could see some of the chutes that come around, you would see that many of them actually look more like webs. They look like a whole network of intertwining cords that go up to these chutes. So how does that apply to what you do? Well, let's talk about that in terms of the supply chain. What would it look like to have a whole layer of redundancy in the supply chain? Let's talk about that first. One option is in having a diversity of suppliers. That seems like a pretty simple way to go. That's a great place to start so that you have redundancy, so that you have no single point of failure. But what does that actually look like? So let's look at the last couple of years and what we have gone through in the last few years with this shutdown. I know of an organization that had a quantity of their product coming that they wanted to get in time for their big sales period. It was around a holiday period. And they had ordered a large quantity that was coming from China. They did not have a backup plan of where else they might be able to source this product from. They had everything that they got in a large quantity from one supplier. Well, the supplier was able to supply it, but guess what? He was never able to enter the United States because of the shutdown. It sat in Long Beach in a container ship, and it just sat there and sat there. And meanwhile, the holiday came and went, and they had 0 sales because they never had their merchandise able to actually sell to their people. They had the orders online, they could never fulfill them. So obviously there are a lot of reasons you want to have a diversity in suppliers, but one possible way that you can do this is not just saying, let's have different people we can source it from, but maybe you have one where you have your quantities where you know this is where we're usually going to get it from. In our big quantities, it's going to cost us less, it's more cost efficient. But maybe you have a backup where it's smaller quantities, more localized, easier to get to, so that in the event that you have a shipping container that's sitting in, you can't get to it, you don't have to lose all of your sales. So one great way of looking at a diversity of suppliers is looking at the different scenarios. Maybe having one that's quantity, having one that is smaller quantities. Yes, you're going to pay a little bit more for that, but it's going to pay off in the sense that you're actually going to be able to have the product that you need or the supplies that you need to be able to do your job. Because there's nothing worse than needing inventory or needing products that you cannot get to be able to produce what you need to produce. So one layer of redundancy, one new net, part of your net and your cord that's going to go up to your parachute is diversity in your suppliers. A second one would be having safety stock. Now, what is safety stock? Some of you do this all of the time, but it just simply means that of the things that are most important to you, you have a supply of that is sitting in reserve. So that just in case you have a shipping container full of your product that's sitting off and you can't get to it, that you are not left, but you actually have some in reserve. What might this look like if things go wrong, if you don't have a safety stock? We have some good friends that opened a little sandwich shop. They were so excited, this was their passion. They bought a franchise from back east and they opened a little franchise here in this state for the first time. And they were excited to be able to produce fresh food, fresh ingredients, and they made everything daily. They sourced everything locally and made their bread fresh so that you went and got, you walked into that store and you could smell the fresh bread and you could smell the buns and you knew that everything was coming from local farms. The only thing they really brought in was the wheat to make the bread. And they didn't carry stock of it, they just brought it in weekly. Well, a couple of years ago, as transportation changed and the oil and gas prices went up, what happened to the cost? Huge increase in their fees. And so in order to have a delivery of their normal amount of wheat that they would bring in to run their little shop, fees doubled in order to have them just be able to bring it in their normal supply. And they didn't have anything left in stock. And so they had no choice but to pay those higher fees. So what happens when all of a sudden you're paying 2 to 3 times as much for the cost of your materials and products? You have to do what? What do you have to do? What are your options?
Raise prices.
Yeah.
Raise prices or
Lose money.
lose money. So they tried first to raise prices. And as they started to raise the price of a sandwich from $5 to $7 to $9, they realized people weren't going to pay anymore. So then they tried to just take a pay cut to see if they could lose money instead, lower the prices back down, get them where it was reasonable, and they could just survive the storm. But in the end, they didn't survive the storm because they lost some customers when they raised prices, and then when they put their prices back down, then they lost enough money and didn't have enough safety stock. They actually had to close their doors. So you think about that. Here's a family that invested all of their money and all of their savings in addition to their excitement, their energy, their passion, wanting to be part of a local community, and they closed their doors. And that could have been prevented had they had some safety stock of one of their most basic ingredients. Now, everything else they were still able to source locally, but that one ingredient was enough to actually cause them to shut their doors. And I agree, that look on your face, it is a bummer. It is a bummer. And yet it's something that had they built in a few extra layers of redundancy, they could have avoided. Another area that you might consider is the route that your supplies need to take in order to get here. So maybe China shouldn't be the only way to get here, from China to here. Are there other routes that you can use? Are there other places? Are there other locations that you can source from? Or are there physically other geographic routes that your supplies could take to get here? So that if something happens and, heaven forbid, a freeway system shuts down, that your trucks are not stuck with one way to get here, because there'll be some other place, some other way to get them there. You also might look at it in the sense of, is there a different form of transportation? If your shipping container is the only way that you're going to get your products here, and there's a problem with that, that could be a single point of failure. So could you use a trucking system? Could you use trains? Could you hire local drivers to pile stuff in the back of their car and ship it across the country if you need to? So to have a contingency plan in place just helps so that you are not falling prey to those situations when they occur. Because I'm not going to say if they occur, it's a matter of when they occur. Because I think one of the things we have learned in the last few years is to expect the unexpected. We don't always know what that is going to be. We may not have predicted that it was going to come in the form of a pandemic shutdown, where 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years, 2 years plus of life turning upside down, organizations and businesses being shut down, people closing their doors, not being able to gather in groups. I don't think that any of us necessarily foresaw that. But even if you don't have a specific disaster in mind or catastrophe in mind, if you have built in some of these layers of redundancy, you're still able to find ways to work around the problem. Now, here at O.C.Tanner, you're some of the experts in that. I know this. You have done some incredible things to be able to keep your doors open. Yes, we're going to have some all positive fingers pointed in this direction. Good things that you've been able to do to keep doors open, to keep people working, to find other ways to keep going when things are tough. So what are some other layers and chords you could build in? You can look at the technology that is available. There is all sorts of technology, and I heard a few of you talking about some new technology right before we came in here. You were talking about ChatGPT. Well, what is ChatGPT? It is like the savior for college kids because they're never gonna have to write a paper again. They're just gonna say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me, what is it like to have no single point of failure in the supply chain system? And all of a sudden, this beautiful paper is gonna be written for them. I don't know how the heck I don't know what that's gonna mean for the future of our students, but there is technology that is out there, from AI systems to, think about when you get in your car and you are trying to figure out the best way to get to your destination. We have apps and software that now tells us real time, oh, you wanna get off this road real fast because all of a sudden there's a slowdown on this route. So if you find and implement that technology in your process of supply chain, then you are able to avoid some of those things that maybe you can't predict ahead of time, but if you're at least aware of them as they're happening live, you can avoid some of the problems and the issues. And maybe things like ChatGPT and other AI can actually help you predict what is going to happen. That as you listen to geopoliticists in the world who tell you what's going on, and because of the turmoil and unrest in Ukraine and Russia, there's going to be limited supplies of this, then you start to use that information, find the technologies that will help you source things in other areas, and simply be aware of what's happening in different geographic areas in the world that might impact what you are doing, the products that you are producing, and the supplies and inventory that you need in your supply chain. And then the final area I'll talk about for just a minute is with personnel and training. One thing that you always want to make sure that you do to have redundancy is cross-train so that you have different people who are trained to be able to do that job. You don't ever want to have one person own an entire account where they are the single point of contact, the only person that your supplier or vendor knows, because what happens the day that they get sick? They're got COVID and they're out, or something happens in their family and they have to take a step back. I can tell you from firsthand experience that this is a difficult place to be in when you're the one that holds all of the knowledge and all of a sudden you have to step away. You don't want to leave your organization hanging in that regard. So you don't want to have one single point of contact from your organization, but you also don't want to have a single point of contact from the other organization. You want to make sure that your suppliers and vendors have someone else who also knows your account. Someone else that you can contact in the event that they have the situation on their end instead of on your end. So those are just a few things that you can do. Cross-training, making sure that you don't have a single point of contact within your organization and your supplier organization. But really, the goal of all of this is for the fun. You just want to make sure that that parachute keeps on flying. So as long as you build in all of these different layers and levels of redundancy, you're going to be able to find different ways to succeed, even if it means you have to take the long way around. You're going to make sure that there's no one cut that's going to make your parachute crash. So as you go forward, I would encourage you to look at different parts of your supply chain, different areas in your organization where you might be able to expand your spider web of cords that go to your parachute so that you can keep that parachute going and that you can yell woohoo all the way down until you gently reach the ground. Thank you, my friends.
That was a fantastic experience today. Thank you so much for coming and teaching us about the parachute principle. If you want to learn more about some of the content that Jodi is training and teaching, where do they need to go?
You can find me online at Jodi, Jodi, Brown.com or globalleadergroup.com/Jodi.
Yeah, and we'll add those links in the description so it makes it easy to remember. And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. I'm also super active on LinkedIn. It's one of the places I spend too much time. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to help you and your organization learn additional principles on how to become anti-fragile and thrive during times of crisis and change.
I think one of the other things that no one knows is that your husband, Tolan Brown, works here and has been here for more than 15 years. So we have a great connection to you.
We do. That might be how I got in the door. So you take whatever entrees you have to get in and you just kick that door wide open.
Well, it's been working great. You're both a powerhouse. Tolan is a fantastic leader, very influential, and we have really appreciated having him with us.
He's a good one.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Thanks.